Hi everyone! So this is the first time I'm going to be doing two videos for my most favorite and least favorite movies I saw this year. I started reviewing movies in 2014, and in 2013, 5 movies came out that got my A or A+ seal. In 2014, I had 7. And this year, I have 6, and I decided that along with 4 movies that got an A- or so rating, I'm going to be doing a video because I feel I've finally seen enough movies this time to do an appropriate one. Now, the thing about me as a movie critic is with my relationship with Rotten Tomatoes. I'm the only critic I know who disagrees with the tomato meter more than he agrees. So chances are you're gonna see a movie in this video that you don't like. I did a little count, and 5 of the movies on this list have a negative rating on Rotten Tomatoes. But they're what I liked, and this is my own video. So without further ado, let's dive in, starting with number 10. So starting off this list is Minions. I have to admit, I wasn't a big fan of the first 2 Despicable Me movies, which I know isn't a popular opinion, but I felt the first one was a bit too depressing and embarrassing to warrant a second viewing. It was okay, and the second one seemed to juggle every cliche found in a general animated kids movie. But with Minions, I felt that Illumination Entertainment finally got it right. I really admire the fact that the main Minions in this movie were compressed down to 3 so that we can give them names. That was cool. But I felt it was funnier, more surprising, and much less annoying, and basically pretty unpredictable, especially its marvelous ending. It also comes into this list because of how surprised I was, considering I wasn't a Minions fan until I saw this movie. Now taking the number 9 spot is The Martian, based off of the book by Andy Weir, unread by me. I had relatively high expectations going in, and they met all of them, I have to admit. During the first scene when Mark Watney awakens, aka Matt Damon, and he's low on oxygen and has to staple his stomach back after a big injury, you can't help but feel claustrophobic and worried about him. And whenever it's not being funny or entertaining, it's being very scientific, up to the point where it seems like there was no science fiction in this movie whatsoever. Well, I mean, apart from the story, of course, about a man being stuck on Mars with 140 million miles away from help. But what sells the movie out for me is the key point in making a movie like this, which this movie doesn't avoid. It's that these rescue missions take time. Like, you could spend a year out in space in 0 gravity, and that can be pretty dramatic. That can be very heartbreaking for you, your family, and even the crew itself. So I myself am pretty surprised with number 8, but considering that it's a full-on musical and considering I had such a good time with it, the more negative reviews I see for it, the less I understand why. Yep, it's strange magic. I have to admit, I went into this movie knowing, after doing a bit of research, that there are over a dozen musical numbers in this movie, some replayed. But I was prepared for that, and I was a little worried I wouldn't like it. Turns out, I loved almost every song in there, and that's pretty rare for me. But I think that its animation is very edgy, it is terrific to look at. All of the characters are pretty unique in their own way, especially their expressions, and the choice of music was very smart. I really liked the way they seemed to make love songs sound like a big rock opera. And not to mention that George Lucas and his team of animators are able to make a full-on musical without losing its touching Beauty and the Beast-like message. That's something that's pretty hard to do. Sometimes when you go overboard on the music, you can lose what the movie's supposed to be about. Not this one. Now taking the number 7 spot is Inside Out. Yeah, I love animation, but I mean, who didn't see this coming? The first time I heard of Inside Out, I thought, That's Osmosis Jones. Then I found out it was more like Osmosis Jones meets Shark Boy and Lava Girl, which is one of my favorite films ever since I saw it almost 10 years ago. I think that no other movie this year made me look inside my head and wonder as much as this movie, and chances are you feel the exact same way. So much in this movie as you go on the adventure with joy and sadness just makes sense when it comes to the logic inside what could be going on in your head. And what I think makes the movie terrific and I think perfect for kids, apart from its terrific adventure, its smart humor, and spot-on personalities of each emotion, is that after the kids see this movie, and some adults as well, they may think, what does their head look like? And they may come up with stories and movies of their own to share one day after imagining why they feel a certain way towards an event. I think that that's something that very few movies can accomplish. Now coming in at number 6 is DreamWorks' Home. Yes, I know, 4 of the movies I've shown already are animation. Am I going to stop? Well, I'll stop right here, because my favorite animated movie that came out this year, better than Minions, better than Inside Out, better than Strange Magic, was Home. And I think the reason I say that is because of Jim Parsons and Rihanna. Jim Parsons is the only actor I can imagine that can pull off bad grammar and make it funny rather than annoying. And Rihanna makes a great voice acting representation of a girl who's in distress because her mother is missing. And while it's true, the Boov are quite over-wimpy, I think that they do show an interesting similarity to us about keeping your foot down rather than running away. Now taking the number 5 spot is a movie that had a lot going for it and, yes, delivered. It made the number 5 spot. What else did you expect? And after this movie I was wondering, is the 4th or the 5th one better? I just can't decide. But that's right, it's Mission Impossible Rogue Nation. I haven't seen the first 3 movies, but it seems like each and every time the filmmakers make up a bigger and bigger situation that would just be impossible to accomplish if it weren't for the MIF team. Or no, IMF. Oof. And just a quick comment on the movie. You know the scene where it shows that how you walk is monitored, and if it's different then you're rejected and shocked? That would really scare me. That, and you think that the movie's going one place and then it cartwheels backwards to another. That didn't make any sense. I guess right now I feel like how Alec Baldwin felt when Ethan Hunt took off his mask at that one scene that was so funny and so weird. And I don't think I've ever seen a first scene that was so funny and yet so serious at the same time. Everything here just works. Now I know that a lot of people probably haven't seen this movie or don't expect me to put it anywhere near my top list, but turns out taking the number 4 place is Survivor, starring Pierce Brosnan and Mila Jovovich. It's just, a movie has to entertain me and I have to enjoy myself in the long run, and Survivor had both of these and never turned themselves down. To sum this movie up briefly, it acknowledges the fact that if you get in the way of a big terrorist, chances are you're really in danger and someone is going to try to kill you, someone's going to try to snipe you, and soon your whole world may be just against you, and that's life. Such as all those YA novels I've read where someone who interferes with a big corporation or a big government is now in a whole load of... And Survivor is probably the best movie this year to acknowledge that. And now for number 3. I know that usually people fight over their number 2 and number 1 spot and they just juggle it until they decide, okay, I've hardened it down to this one being number 1 and this one number 2. For me, it was number 2 and number 3. I couldn't pick, but now all of a sudden, it's clear enough. Now, taking the number 3 spot is McFarland USA. I had relatively low expectations since I haven't seen a lot of sports movies. My sister Abby's favorite movie, or used to be her favorite, was Remember the Titans and Wreck-It Ralph, and now it's this movie, or at least as far as I'm concerned, that's what she said before, after we saw this, and she jumped up and cheered. I jumped up and cheered a little bit as well. So let me tell you a little reason that I related to this movie a lot. I'm on a cross-country team at school. It's not as big as McFarland or all the other schools that they've versed. And usually during every meet and race, it is pretty frightening for me having to run 7 kilometers. And McFarland USA brings to light apparently what was one of the poorest countries in the US, might still be today, but it makes for a pretty darn good movie that quite a lot of people, I think, worldwide can relate to, whether in poverty or a little reluctant about going to meet someone new. This movie was far more heartbreaking and entertaining than I thought it was going to be. And one of the final scenes didn't actually juggle the cliches that I thought it would be. I thought that there would just be a big fight, a big misunderstanding, and a scene that I just wouldn't want to watch again. And it turns out McFarland USA doesn't have that. Instead, it resorts to one of the best speeches I've ever heard in a movie before, and Kevin Costner was a lot better than I thought he was going to be. A lot more dramatic, and so were all of the other cross-country runners. They were gems in the movie. And I related to no other movie this year more than McFarland USA, even Inside Out. Now, you've probably been waiting a while for what's in my number 2 spot. You may have been thinking, when's William gonna put that down? Is William actually not gonna put that on there? Does William not like good movies? Nope. I just saw this movie a few days ago and everything is still fresh in my head. Now, Strange Magic is not the only George Lucas production I'm putting on this list. I put Star Wars The Force Awakens at number 2. And let me just say that every special effect is off the charts amazing. Every character, especially Daisy Ridley and John Ortega's characters, were impossible not to look at and respect and follow around. Daisy Ridley and John Ortega are terrific actors. They're adorable together also. And it is a lot more than a nostalgia trip, though it is a nostalgia trip in one sense. But simply put, it's a great story where I didn't feel its long running time, and it was able to use that long running time to make an amazing story that I know that we've all been waiting for almost a year, and it really delivered on everything. I thought that it was going to end at a certain part and just make me go, why did they do that? Why did they have to put such a bad cliffhanger in there? Well, they actually put a good cliffhanger in here, one of the most heartbreaking scenes you will ever see in cinema. And really, there's nothing that you can't admire in this. But let me tell you one thing, even Star Wars The Force Awakens can't compare to my number 1 spot. I saw it and I decided, that's it, number 1 is on lockdown. And that is... I'll let you know in just a moment. So remember my most favorite movies I saw in 2014? The Maze Runner was one of them. And it turns out my number 1 pick is its sequel, The Scorch Trials. I didn't know if I was gonna like this movie at all, because if you remember from my top 10 worst books of the year list, The Scorch Trials was on it and very high up. I was sort of dreading this movie, though I had all the interest in the world to see it, if that makes sense. And it turns out, The Scorch Trials erases every single flaw I had with the book, and I mean every single one. Out of all the movies this year, The Scorch Trials was the only one that didn't have a single flaw. This one was perfect at every line of dialogue, every action scene, every surprise, and there are a lot of surprises that made me jump. No other movie was as good as this one this year. And now I can't wait for The Death Cure, though somehow... Well, if Westfall comes back, then I think it'll be as good as these two. We can only hope. So there, that's my 10 best movies of the year list. And soon I'll be doing a worst list. That's coming up really soon. So I think 2015 has been a pretty good year. And whatever your favorite movies of this year were, comment and let me know. And I look forward to watching movies with you all in 2016.